Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance. Thank you for being present here to hear me ramble on for 20 minutes. Now, it's very significant that I am speaking at an SJI venue. Why? Because when I was in school, I was from a competitor school out in East Coast called St. Patrick's School.
Yes.
But just scream out. What it meant was that if we were to stray from our territory and come down to city centre, we quietly took out our school badges and put in our pockets. Because if SJI boys, they spotted a patrician, they say, what are you doing here? Similarly, we would do the same if we spotted an SJI boy in Katong. Territorial divisions in the 60s were real. But we all came under the greater banner of Christian Brothers Schools. And this thing was brought to me a few months back in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, and I took a Grab taxi, and the guy was a young guy, a young Chinese guy, very polite, and he asked me a question. He said, "Are you a Lasallian?" And I was thinking, what is the significance of that? Are you a Lasallian? Because I had not heard this term for a long time. And today when I was sitting in the tuck shop, in the canteen, I saw somebody with a t-shirt and the word Lasallian. So the term is actually in use in Singapore as well. But on that day when he asked me, "Are you a Lasallian?" it took me a while, and I said, "I'm not sure, but I came from a Christian Brothers School background. Maybe that's what you are asking." And he said, yeah. I am from LaSalle, Ipoh. And so I said, "Why did you ask if I'm a Lasallian?" He said, "Well, perhaps, it's the way of speech and differential. Are we differential? Are Lasallians differential? Can I ask the Trong here? Do you all see yourself as differential, giving way to others?" Okay. Now, the theme of this event is called Chrysalis, and my topic for 20 minutes is the Singapore Sixties, for which I wrote 3 books and produced 8 CDs and played in bands. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the theme Chrysalis to examine certain aspects of that decade and leave it open for interpretation from those of you all who are present here. Singapore became independent in 1959, so we are actually a very young nation. Although some of you all might say 1965, but theoretically we got our independence from the British in 59. In terms of music activity in the succeeding decades that came after that, I would think that the 60s was actually the most productive decade in terms of output. Bands signed, records released, concerts held in the nation. And keeping in mind the theme of Chrysalis transformation, I'm going to talk about some aspects of that decade within the context of the theme of today's event. At the end of 1961, November 1961, there was a concert at a venue called Gay World. Now, in case any of you are sniggering as to why a venue is called Gay World, we did have a venue called Gay World. It was at Lorong 1, it does not exist now. We had 4 worlds. There was Gay World, Happy World, New World, and Beauty World. Only Beauty World remains because it is the name of a station. But the locality is exactly where Beauty World was then. Gay World was at Lorong 1. Happy World was at Kim Seng Road, and New World was at Kitchener Road. These worlds were actually like amusement parks, and they catered to the local population, and also the British forces were very much in attendance there. They found it very entertaining to enter these worlds. There were like arcade type games. There was also a dance hall where you had the so-called taxi girls who were available for dancing, but nothing further than that. No hanky-panky allowed. So coming back to the concert was by a British band, Cliff Richard and the Shadows. Cliff Richard was a relatively big name at that time, and so was his band, because they had a hit single called Apache, which became the premier instrumental hit of that first 2 years of that decade. The concert was very well attended because there was the British forces, the children of British soldiers, and also the local Singaporeans. And for a lot of Singaporeans who attended, maybe males, it was like light bulbs flashed in their heads, because what they saw was 5 young men looked very sharp in suits. Cliff Richard was the front man, the Shadows was 4. They were an electric band. Now, this might not sound like such a big deal, but it was the first time that Singaporeans had seen an electric band on stage, and for quite a few of them, it was almost like the formula had been provided. Drums, electric bass, 2 guitars, front person, singer. They said, this is it. This is the blueprint for a pop band. Because before that, it was mostly duos, trios, a couple of singers, acoustic guitars, a very folk-oriented kind of thing. But here they were seeing in the flesh how a proper pop band projected. And what happened immediately following that concert was that a lot of bands formed in Singapore in that vein. And we always proclaim that we are a multiracial, multilingual nation. At that time it was very true, because we had the English pop music scene, the Malay language pop music scene, the Mandarin language pop music scene, and also the Indian language pop music scene. They all existed side by side, and each stream had their releases. So it's not just the English pop music scene being dominant and the rest being like so-so. They all had equal output. The next trend which came forward was when the Beatles hit the scene in 1963. That was worldwide. I think the impact of the Beatles was felt all over the world. And similarly, it also impacted the local music scene. But it also meant that hitherto the standards were raised much higher. You had to be good, you had to be competent at your instruments, and you also had to be able to sing. So you might have a band where a front person singer not playing an instrument, and then the Beatles types bands where they were simultaneously singer instrumentalists. So that was the next wave. If you read local history, if you read in the history books, they call it Mercy Beat, the British invasion, and so forth. It also had an impact in Singapore because it changed the way the bands henceforth formed. They played the type of music they played. Then from the Beatles onwards, the next wave was rhythm and blues, which was a harder brand of music because it demanded from the singer tougher edge of singing. You could get away with singing like the Cliff Richard and the Shadows type of numbers, where the male singers or the female singers had very lightweight, sexy kind of voices. But for rhythm and blues, because the music derived from sources other than like lightweight pop, it required stronger punch from the singers. You had to be able to sing from your diaphragm up and throw your voice outward without the aid of amplification. So there were bands that attempted it, but lesser in nature. It was also at this time that folk music started to make waves, and you would know one of the premier names, Bob Dylan, who incidentally will be playing a concert in Singapore. Well, the jury is out on Bob Dylan because a lot of people still say that he can't sing in key. But he wrote songs, and he wrote songs that were very topical. Like his first big hit in 1965, Subterranean Homesick Blues. You might have seen the video on YouTube where he's standing on the street and he's just throwing placards which are the lyrics to the song. And it's not the usual type of lyrics about love and romance and all that, but it's, the first line goes, Johnny's sitting in the basement thinking about the government, that kind of lyrics. Now, what happened in Singapore was this. Everybody listened to music. I mean, when we were in our teens, we all liked it. We all listened to what was available, what was in the charts. But there were those the more discerning types, the more intelligent ones, I would say, who were listening to this new brand of music where the lyrics seemed to speak to them. Okay, now a little bit of digression as to how the two sexes listen to music. I can safely say that as a male, maybe as an MCP, I've never really paid attention to lyrics. I listen to music in totality. So, lyrics sort of like never entered my consciousness, that's the truth. But ladies seem to listen to every line, and they hear the meanings in the lyrics. They hear what the singer is trying to say. Somehow this seems to escape guys. But I don't know if all are in agreement or not. But anyway, the thing is this. When this form of music, which had more intelligent lyrics, begin to come about, maybe in folk or in less popular forms of music in the 60s, a lot of guys and girls in the schools in tertiary, they used the music as a springboard to like heavy intellectual discussions. It became the backdrop to what was going on in the world. Or am I being propelled to careers or directions that are being decided by others, but it does not really reflect what I'm thinking about? See, because in the 60s, it was also a very turbulent era. There were the so-called Free World Bloc and the monolithic communist bloc. You know, the threat of the Soviet Union, China, Eastern Europe, the domino theory, and that became real for Asia when the Vietnam War erupted in 1965. And the local newspapers, they carried gruesome stories about the progress of the Vietnam War in Straits Times newspapers. I began to read newspapers at the tender age of 9 or 10 purely because of the war. It was not fiction, but it was actually happening in real life. So it sort of propelled my interest in reading about the war. And I guess it was similar to a lot of young Singaporeans, because we now had the specter of these events that are happening in the world. Maybe some are distant, but some which are closer to us. And then another event that took place was that, as I was saying earlier, Singapore became independent in 1959, and in 1962 we joined Malaysia. Subsequently, we got expelled in 1965. And when we got expelled in 1965, we felt very vulnerable, very naked, because we were a pinprick of a nation, and we were surrounded by hostile neighbors. And one of these hostile neighbors was Indonesia, whose President Sukarno actually said that they wanted to crush this irritant. And if you remember, in 1965, there was the bombing of McDonald House, for which 2 Indonesian Marines subsequently got hanged about 3 years later. So we now do not have the umbrella of being part of a collective entity called Malaysia. We are standing on our own. We did have the British bases on the land, so we had that protection. But we were on our own then. I want to tell you something very happy. I've been told that my time is up, because when I did the rehearsal, I spoke for 8 minutes when I was assigned 18. Now, they tell me I have to end. Okay, my conclusion is this. The theme for today was chrysalis transformation. I used the prism of this era to show that these events, all these events that happen, they actually affect us. So, in conclusion, the message I want to pass to you all is, we cannot be insulated from events happening, because directly or indirectly, they will affect us. So with that thought, I'd like to end my talk here. Thank you very much.